Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to today's 3:30 p.m. Friday reading. Thanks for joining me. Hope everybody's doing well and has some fun things planned for the weekend. I think we're supposed to have good weather. Anyway, so this week I'm going to read just a couple of uh, short stories from this book. I read some from this last time. Once again, I apologize, it is backwards. Heroines of the American Revolution, and these are stories about America's founding mothers. So the women, we hear about the men all the time. We hear about John Adams and George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. Excuse me. I mean, they're all, of course, important, but the women, they had some amazing roles as well. So, all right, let me go ahead and we'll get started. We're going to start with a woman named Penelope Barker. All right. Before the signing of the Declaration of Independence, men debated in local assemblies how to respond to British injustices. Women had no public outlet to express their convictions or to take a stand. Rebellion was considered men's business. Then the women of Edenton, North Carolina, took a stand in 1774 that helped show women how they could oppose the British too. All right. Penelope Barker, leader of the Edenton Tea Party. "It's never been done by women, I tell you," Penelope Barker's husband said to her. She still held out the document she had asked him to read. "Never before have women protested against the British." Penelope couldn't help sighing a little when she heard her husband's words. He must have heard her because he suddenly became more encouraging. He came over to where she was standing by the fire. "It's wonderful what you are doing," Penelope smiled at him. "But all I'm trying to say is the British may not take you seriously. You know how little they value a woman's opinion." It was October 24th, 1774, and the American Revolutionary War was still months off, but the spirit of independence was growing stronger in the American colonies. In the town of Edenton, North Carolina, a group of women were meeting to sign a declaration Penelope Barker had written. The declaration stated they would not drink tea from England or wear clothes made from British cloth. Penelope Barker knew how little most men thought of a woman's opinion, but she knew in her heart that the women of Edenton were going to do the right thing. For years, the British had been unfairly taxing the colonies. They taxed basic necessities like tea and cloth. They even taxed the space in colonists' homes. And most bothersome, the American colonists who were paying taxes were not represented in the British Parliament. That was the British Parliament's the governing body, kind of like our Congress, but that's over in Britain. 51 women gathered in Elizabeth King's house to hear Penelope read her declaration. Penelope thought she was going to be nervous until she looked out into the crowd and saw how serious all the women's faces were. These were women she saw daily shopping and caring for their children. "Maybe it has only been men who have protested the king up to now," Penelope began. "That only means we women have taken too long to let our voices be heard. We are signing our names to a document, not hiding ourselves behind costumes like the men in Boston did at their tea party. The British will know who we are." When she finished reading her declaration, Penelope asked if there were any questions. Mrs. Asbury raised her hand and said, "Yes, just one." "May I be the first to sign it?" All the women laughed and stood up to sign the declaration. The British did ridicule the women. Cartoons in the British newspapers showed the Edenton women signing the declaration and emptying their tea canisters. The British press called it the Edenton Tea Party, but the British could not ignore the fact women were now taking a stand. Soon women all over the colonies were boycotting British tea and cloth. The tax money the British wanted so much from the American colonies began to dwindle. Penelope Barker's declaration gave every woman in America a way to rebel against the British. America's women then showed the British that they would not stand for taxation without representation. All right. And here's a little some information about the importance of tea. In colonial times, tea drinking was a sign of sophistication and luxury. Tea was also considered healthier than plain water, which was believed to sap the body's strength. Microscopic germs carrying diseases were still undiscovered. The British insisted on taxing tea to prove they ruled the colonies. The British wanted the tea tax money to make colonial governors and judges dependent on England and not accountable to the local colonists. So they would tax the colonists, then they would take that money to install governors of the colonies to enforce British rule on the Americans. So after a while, they were having none of that, and then that's how the American Revolution started. And here's Penelope reading her document to the women. All right, we'll read another one. We got time. The Battle of Cupins in South Carolina was one of the turning points of the American Revolutionary War. General Cornwallis sent 1,100 of his best British soldiers to crush the Patriot army led by General Morgan. At Cupins, the Patriots won, killing or capturing 90% of the British. Shortly afterwards, General Cornwallis was forced to move his army to Yorktown, Virginia. At Yorktown, General Washington cornered and defeated the British, ending the war. The French also assisted with that. All right, so this is about Catherine Moore Barry. She's the heroine of Cowpens. Catherine, Kate, Barry knew the Patriots needed her help again. General Morgan, with 600 men, was fleeing from the British. General Morgan's sharpshooters had been a thorn in the British side throughout the American Revolutionary War. Now, a British army nearly twice the size of Morgan's was out to get him for good. Many times in the past, Kate had been a scout and guide for the Patriots. She was as good on horseback as any man, and she knew the countryside and all the Indian trails for miles and miles. It was said that no group of Patriot soldiers had ever been caught by surprise when Kate was around. She had almost been caught by the British a number of times, but always managed to escape. Once, when Kate heard that the British soldiers were returning again, she had to tie her 2-year-old daughter to the bedpost because there was no babysitter while she rode off to warn her husband and his men. I guess that's one way to babysit. The Patriots in her area fought in small bands using hit-and-run tactics. Kate knew each group and where their hideouts were. She also helped them by concealing food in the hollow trunks of trees so that they would always have something to eat, even on the run. General Morgan now needed more soldiers. He had a plan to defeat the British who were chasing him, but he did not have enough men. The general got word to Kate Barry. Could she round up all the local bands of patriots and convince them to join in the fight with him? Kate knew she could. She knew how to find all the local patriots, and the patriots knew they could trust Kate. In less than 2 weeks, General Morgan's army swelled to 1,600 men. The Patriots then allowed the British to catch them at Cowpens on January 17, 1781. General Morgan's plan worked so well that only 12 Patriot soldiers were killed while the British army was destroyed. Without all the reinforcements, General Morgan's army would have been the one destroyed. Kate Barry was acclaimed far and wide as the heroine of Cowpens. Oh, interesting. All right. So we'll read one more for this afternoon. In 1780, the British nearly controlled South Carolina. Many patriots had fled or taken oaths not to fight against the king. Marauding bands of British loyalists terrorized the few remaining patriots. One turning point that rallied patriot morale in South Carolina took place near Martha Bratton's home. After that battle, more patriots returned to join the local militias. The reinforcements led to a series of patriot victories. At the beginning of the Revolutionary War, the British had most of the victories. There were very few victories for the patriots, the Americans. All right, Martha Bratton, a brave and compassionate patriot woman. By the summer of 1780, it seemed to Martha Bratton the American Revolutionary War would never end. In Charleston, South Carolina, many patriots started giving up hope that they might win the war, especially after the city surrendered to the British. Over 5,000 men were taken prisoner, and most of the Patriot supplies for the state were captured. British troops roaming the South Carolina countryside met little resistance in the following months. Americans were offered the choice of accepting British protection or imprisonment. An English general boasted that in the southern colonies the American Revolutionary War had ended. Gunpowder, like many other items, was scarce during this time. Martha Barton and her husband had been entrusted by the American governor of South Carolina to hold a supply of the precious powder. When her husband was away fighting for the Patriots, Martha was responsible for the gunpowder. And here she is laying out some gunpowder, and then she's lighting it to blow it up. The British found out where it was hidden and decided to steal it. Martha heard of their plan. They'll wish they'd never come here, she smiled as she walked over to the kegs of gunpowder. Martha had a plan of her own. I know where the British are coming from. I'll lay a trail of gunpowder going the other way. There will be a big surprise waiting for them redcoats. That was another term for the British, because their uniforms were red. Martha decided that just when the soldiers got near the supplies, she would light the trail of gunpowder and blow up all the ammunition. It's the last thing they'll be expecting, she thought. After she finished laying her trail, Martha hid in the woods. As the British approached, she raced to where the gunpowder trail lay and lit a match in it. In less than a minute, she heard a huge explosion and men screaming. Running away from the explosion, Martha was caught by the British. The British commander demanded to know who had set the gunpowder on fire. Martha looked him straight in the face and answered, "It was I who did it. Let the consequence be what it will. I glory in having prevented the mischief contemplated by the cruel enemies of my country." Unexpectedly, the British let Martha go free as they marched off. When the British authorities heard of the gunpowder incident and that it was hidden at the Barton's house, they came looking for Martha's husband. He was not there, and Martha refused to tell the British where her husband had gone. The head British officer became furious with Martha. Picking up a reaping hook, he threatened to slash her throat. Martha stood in front of her children, refusing to give up any information. The British lieutenant begged the senior officer to let Martha go. With a nasty glance at his subordinate, the officer finally agreed. He then ordered Martha to make dinner for all the British soldiers. After dinner, the English troops left Martha's house, retiring to another farm a half-mile away. Later that night, Martha's husband came home. Martha told him where the British were camped. Although the Patriot band was outnumbered, they launched a surprise attack. Some British soldiers were killed, including the senior officer. Others were wounded and some taken prisoner. A few managed to escape. The lieutenant who had pleaded for Martha's life was now the leader of the British troops. When he was captured, many patriots wanted to hang him as an example. The officer asked for one last favor, and that was to be brought before Martha Barton. Martha instantly recognized him as the officer who had saved her life. Despite all the hardships and dangers the British had put Martha and her family through, she pleaded with the patriots to spare this honorable and decent man. Because of Martha's speech, he was not hanged. Martha realized how cruel people were becoming from fighting the American Revolutionary War. She wanted to remind everyone that freedom required tolerance and love even for your enemies. So she turned her house into a hospital and nursed both British and American soldiers. And so here's a little bit of information about gunpowder. Gunpowder is a mixture of potassium nitrate, which colonists called saltpeter, charcoal, and sulfur. Used to fire guns and cannons, the British made it illegal for colonists to produce or import gunpowder at the beginning of the American Revolutionary War. The Patriots set up their own manufacturing sites, but were often low on gunpowder. Cool. So the women, they play a really big role in the Revolutionary War. Lots of different things for them to do. There's a lot more stories in this book. We're obviously not going to read all of them, but anyway, if you missed today's reading, it'll be on my Facebook wall, and I will also post it on my YouTube channel. So Sean Forschler, YouTube, Google that, and it'll come up. It's under my Children's Weekly Reading Corner playlist, and I hope everybody has a safe and awesome weekend. All right. Oh, one last thing I forgot. I will not be on live next Friday. So next Friday is off, but I'll be back the following Friday. So everybody enjoy the weekend and have a nice couple weeks.